Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Winback and I'll be your host today on RPG Radio as we get into another leveling guide for a build that I have been really enjoying in my downtime. This is the Oppressor. It's a Necromancer and Oathkeeper build, and it is fantastic at dealing lots and lots of AoE damage and having a couple pets that float around that can never ever die. So this is the leveling guide, like I said. Since it is only the leveling portion of the build, we're only in Elite at the moment, and I'm going to talk about the key abilities for this guide in terms of actives and passives, and I'll tell you what devotions and gear got me to this point, and what I feel like the most important things are while you're getting up to the ultimate difficulty. So, all that being said, this is a YouTube video. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe your heart out. Now remember, this is a leveling guide for this build, so there are going to be a lot of buttons on that hotbar that you will not see in the next video. There will be some definite fat trimming as it comes down to the higher difficulty for this build, because a lot of it is fairly low in level. Most of it is probably gear based, if we're being honest, and some of it just isn't necessary as a whole. So that being said, the bar is full, but there is a couple skills that we're not going to need to worry about a whole lot in this video. I'll talk to you about the important ones and all that stuff to begin with. Now, first and most importantly for the build, we need to talk about Ravenous Earth. Rav is the biggest part of the two-part combo for this build and comes in from the Necromancer class. The ability is mostly vitality and poison damage with modifiers that reduce enemy damage, resistances, and health in a percentage. So a reduction of enemy health. Good stuff. Vitality damage is baked into the Necromancer's kit anyway. It's like muffins in a bake shop. It's fantastic, so you don't have to look very hard for it. But when you're putting points into the base skill, you're going to increase the damage, but more importantly, you're going to increase the number of projectiles that launch out of this ability. So, if you've been paying attention to the screen at all, you can see the big, weird green volcano butthole thing that shoots out of the ground, and that is the key ability that we're talking about. All those projectiles that shoot out, hidden in AoE, they can hit multiple targets, and they do quite a bit of damage. So, with the number of projectiles getting spammed out, you can see an easy case for this ability to be connected to the Eye of the Guardian devotion. And in fact, there's a ton of points in this video that you'll catch a staggering amount of eyeballs floating around my character as we charge all over the enemy butts. It is actually really cool, and one of the reasons that I like this devotion so much. Now, ultimately, the modifiers for Ravenous Earth are going to do a number of different things. The first is going to increase damage for the poison and vitality aspects, which is fine. I mean, increased damage is always important, but it is also going to reduce damage of the enemies that get hit by it. I think it's a 1 second duration, but the amount of times that it hits means that we can actually reduce it by a decent duration for a fair amount. So that couples really well with our tanky kind of in-your-face playstyle with the shield for the Oppressor, so things work out pretty well. Don't want to spend any dynamite. I don't even have it. I don't feel like going back to get it, but there you have it. So with the tanky playstyle, the damage reduction from Ravenous Earth is incredibly helpful, and since it's hitting in such a big AoE, we're going to have an even more fun time staying alive in the middle of big clumps of enemies. It's fantastic. Not only that, but the next modifier is going to, like I said, reduce resistances, and it's going to give us a reduction to enemy health. So it might not be the most impressive thing when it comes to boss fights, but the percent health reduction on this ability is absolutely maddening levels of good, and I think that it cannot be understated. I think this ability might actually get overlooked quite a bit because of the visuals of it. I could be wrong. I could be just completely talking out of my ass, but there is really just... I've only ever used this build to use Ravenous Earth, and I'll be honest with you, the first time I saw it, I was like, oh man, that's just a butthole. That is just straight up a toxic green butthole. So maybe that's something that people shy away from abilities for. I mean, I don't pick Aether Ray because I'm too hip for that. So, you know what? Who am I to judge? But anyway, like I said, this is the most important ability for this build. It's doing most of the damage. It is the centerpiece of what we're going for. That, however, does revolve around another build, or another ability, called Judgment. Now, Judgment is coming from the Oathkeeper class, and that is a, well, it's just a massive AoE vacuum ability, and it will never, ever not impress me. Now, the ability does mostly physical trauma damage, which is pretty average, all things considered. But where it really shines is the knockdown and the taunt aspects. Judgment is going to basically yank all the baddies towards you with reckless abandon, all while your acidic, angry tornado volcano is spewing viscous amounts of molten vitality damage into them. In truth, it really doesn't matter which order you press these buttons in either. Since Judgment's pulling people towards you, they'll get hit by the Rav bombs, or if you manage to pull them first, you can cast Rav second, and all the baddies are just going to get erupted on from underneath. So there's kind of a shotgun aspect to this, where you can yank everybody together and hit them all at once, or you can spray lots of enemies kind of afterwards, if that makes sense. There is a differential between Rav and Judgment of a few seconds on the cooldown side of things, but really, since Rav has the lower cooldown, the offset isn't a huge deal. You never really have to worry about casting another Ravenous Earth if you mistimed your Judgment, or vice versa. You'll always have the damage when you need it, and that really brings us into the next ability, which is all about movement, all about keeping yourself alive, because since we don't have a panic button on this class, we're going to be mostly focused around moving, making sure we don't get hit by a lot of really random and crazy damage. Now, Vire's Might is going to be that movement ability, and even though I have a glyph giving us some movement on our metal right now, I don't even think I'm going to keep that, because it's taking up a quick bar button, and I don't want to do that with this build. That being said, though, Vire's Might is so incredibly versatile that there is almost no reason to have a backup, even if you want one. Vire's Might starts off at 3.6 seconds on the cooldown department, but if we max out Tectonic Shift, which is the third modifier for this ability, we can actually drop it down to just under 2.5 seconds on the cooldown. And considering how tanky we are and how easy it is for us to just survive a lot of hits, having that Vire's Might up again quickly isn't going to be a big issue. So, imagine going from one group of enemies to the next, surrounded by a hula hoop of eyeballs that explode and deal acid damage on contact. Now imagine that same thing coming at you at the speed of a runaway train. It's basically a brand new level of toxic subway nightmare in 1980s New York for all the bad guys that you are absolutely speeding towards. This devotion plus Vire's Might plus all of the damage that we do on top of that is just a really fantastic combo, and if I could, I would just dump all of my resources into those 4 abilities alone. But there is more to this build, so I guess we kind of have to talk about that too. What I would consider the final key ability for this build is going to be the Guardian of Empyreon, and these guys have been floating around us this whole time. I'm sure you've noticed them. I haven't talked about them even slightly up until this point, but they are without a doubt one of the cooler aspects of the Oathkeeper class, and they actually pair really well with the acid damage in our kit. So, Summon Guardian of Empyreon normally is going to be dealing physical and fire and burn damage, which is in and of itself kind of whatever, but they're completely invincible, and they scale off of player bonuses rather than pet bonuses. So I can build just straight damage, all the stuff that I want to, and never have to worry about increasing their resistances or their health or their attack speed. And all we have to do is take a single point in their modifier called Scion of Dreeg, changing them from a 100% physical conversion to vitality and 100% elemental damage converted to acid. So basically we get the exact types of damage that our Necromancer class wants, and we get these cool green shadowy soldier hammermans following us around the whole time. It is pretty cool in my opinion. Now there is one more active ability that I want to talk about before I get into the active abilities that will definitely not be part of the ultimate build, but the last important one for this build is Mark of Torment. So Mark of Torment is coming from our Necromancer class, and that, though it doesn't need a whole lot of points in it, is basically our equivalent of a panic button. While it doesn't do as much as a Mirror of Arioctes, or something that's going to make you completely invincible, like a Blade Barrier, Mark of Torment is going to block a lot of incoming damage, so that you can just stand and face tank while reflecting that damage back at the target that you're linked to. So it's basically a soul link. You're going to absorb a bunch of damage, throw it back at the target that you're linked to, but more often than not, it's going to last its full duration and keep you alive much, much longer than normal. So if you're playing Necromancer, I highly recommend this ability, especially if you're playing in melee and you're going, you know, kind of balls to the wall like a lot of fun characters do. So that being said, there are a whole bunch of active abilities on the bar right now that are not going to make it, like I said just a little while ago, and those I'll bring up right now. So your Aegis of Men here, the shield throw, Captain America's shield, even though it's acidic, even though it's a projectile, and it does some AoE damage of its own, we're not hanging on to it. It doesn't really mesh well with what I want to do. Since it's ranged, it's just kind of, I don't know, it's a little bit too counterintuitive to what we're working on. So that's going away, and we're going to put those points into something more important for the build, likely the Ravenous Earth modifiers. Next is Fervor. I'm pretty sure, Righteous Fervor, I'm pretty sure that only has like 1 or 2 builds in it to begin with, or 1 or 2 points in it to begin with, so you won't see that one hanging out much longer either. There is also Call of the Grave. Call of the Grave right now, we're just using it to buff up the acid damage from the Ravenous Earth. I don't think this is going to buff it quite enough, because mainly this is, you know, used to buff pet damage. It has a lot of pet uses, but I'm just using it for the, you know, kind of midterm effects of the damage buff to my abilities. So it's not bad, it's just, it's not going to be an ultimate ability. And then there is Ascension, which is going to be, it's another stat buffer. It also increases some damage absorption, but it is also, it's buffing retaliation damage as well as giving a fire retaliation. The modifier for it is fine. I mean, you're going to reduce a lot of CC with clarity of purpose, but it's not going to be enough for me to hang on to, I think. So for the moment, it's on the chopping block, and it's not looking good. As well as my glyph, my charge. It's a targeted charge. I can't remember the name of it either. But you have to have a target to dash to, which is fine. But like I said earlier, Vire's Might has just proven so incredibly useful on such a short cooldown. Really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to keep another movement ability on the metal. Maybe I'll change my mind later, but at the moment it's not something I need. We're also sporting some passives in this build, but ultimately those aren't long for this world either. There is Path of the Three, but after having read Path of the Three a bit more closely, it is only converting 15% of your physical damage to acid, and it is doing more fire damage conversion to acid than I wanted. So that is probably going to get swapped out for, let's see, Harbinger of Souls. On the Necromancer side, that's going to be the Necromancer exclusive, just to up the Vitality and Vitality Decay damage. That's also going to not reduce. It's going to convert 15% physical to Vitality damage, as well as give us attack and casting speed, which is pretty handy, but ultimately, I think, more useful than the Path of the Three in this case. We also have Necrotic Edge. That is dealing cold damage, and that maybe at the beginning of the build felt good, but I'm not holding on to that. I do have some plans to put Reaping Strike into use instead, however, and we'll probably just transfer those points completely. Like I said, we're tossing out Call of the Grave and keeping Mark of Torment, so the one passive we may end up keeping, well, no, there should be two. So, Presence of Virtue from the Oathkeeper side of things, we're going to keep that because that is going to increase our shield block chance, our shield block, the amount of damage that our shield can block, as well as increased health and increased healing effects, even though we don't have any healing buttons. Yeah. So, anyway, Presence of Virtue and Haven are going to be pretty good for the build, and then we're going to keep Resilience as well. Resilience is only going to activate when we drop below 66% health, but gives us a bunch of defensive ability and physical resistance, as well as a maximum to all of our resistances. So this is incredibly strong for Ultimate, because overmaxing those resistances is really, really important, and being able to go even further beyond that is just chef's kiss for staying alive for melee classes. Incredibly important. Would not pass that up. There is also Smite. I don't even know why I have points in this ability. I probably put one in there thinking it was going to be cool, and then I just forgot that you need more than 1 point to make something good. So that's going away. What else is there? I don't believe we're going to be keeping Heart of Wrath for Judgment. But you know what? I don't know. It's to be seen. To be determined if that's going to be as useful as I think it is. But either way, we'll have a lot of points coming up, and I'll mention the devotions real quick here at the end as well, since we haven't talked about those. Your big ones, though, are all pretty easy for leveling. We have got Rat, Eye of the Guardian, which you've seen multiple times already. We've got Acheron's Scorpion. Let's see. There is also Quill, Scholar's Light, Manticore, Affliction. We've got the acidic half of Abomination, and we've got part of Ugal, the Insatiable Knight. I forgot to mention Vulture, because that is in there as well. But these devotions are not permanent either. I haven't figured out which ones are going and which ones are staying, but I do not have plans to keep them all, because I do think there is a more efficient build path to get to Ugal and Abomination for what I want. So, again, it's going to be one in pink, one in green. There's Rat, Acheron, Scorpion, Eye of the Guardian, Scholar's Light, Quill, Manticore, Affliction, Abomination, Ugal the Insatiable Knight, Vulture, and then part of the Wretch. Yeah, so that is going to do it for your devotions. Nice and easy there. Like I said, don't get too attached to them. They won't be there for long. Now, in talking about gear, a lot of this stuff is mostly just elite. I mean, it's not going to be super important. It's just kind of what I could slap together to make the resistances work and get the kind of best damage types for what we're working with. But after having kind of sat down with the build a little bit, a lot of these gear pieces are not going to be maximum opportunity. So things like, let's see, like our belt, for instance. We've got Thorn Girdle of the Misty Glade. It's not doing necessarily the right types of damage. It also isn't giving us points into abilities that we're holding on to, but it does give some decent resistances as well as defensive ability and health. So that's great. Our metal Rot Drinker crest is giving us the right types of damage and points into the modifier for Ravenous Earth, but it's also a pet item, so there's bonuses to pets that we're not making any use of. We've even got things like the Rune Ward leg guards, which are doing absolutely nothing for our kit other than defensive abilities to keep us alive. Even Vestments of the Great Guardian, which is a chest piece, is going to put points into Path of the Three, which we do not need whatsoever, but it gives us a cool passive that is going to give us chaos resistance as well as some poison damage. So it's kind of give and take on the gear. Some of this stuff is good, some of this stuff is really, you know, average. But our our relic, probably easily enough is going to carry over into ultimate. That's called Meditation. Meditation gives you acid, vitality, poison, and vitality decay, as well as defensive ability, total speed, poison and acid resistance, and reduced entrapment duration. You also get +1 into everything in Oathkeeper, as well as a really cool passive called Eldritch Ruminations. So that's going to be giving you flat acid and vitality damage, buff those up as well, and then a 33% chance of a second of 0.5 seconds of Confuse Retaliation, which is not a type of retaliation that you see very often. So I would 100% pick this relic every time. Meditation is incredibly good for this build in particular, and it is incredibly good, I think, for melee focused acid type builds. So there you have it. But that's it for gear, really. Again, not going to be a whole lot to worry about until we get into the next video, where I've been able to flesh things out a little bit more and try harder. But you have all the abilities. What's important there? You've got the devotions, even though, you know, most of them are set. There are a couple that are going to be min-maxed to their maximum efficiency. But that is it for this build. We'll be back next week with the conclusion so you can see it in Ultimate. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I will see you next time.